All right. Great, thanks. And again, as Andrew said, thanks for coming tonight. So we're going to start talking about how to determine if a process is really good for automation, right? How do you find those processes? Somebody said, I think I heard someone talking about, so couldn't any process be automated, and shouldn't it be if it can be? Maybe, maybe not, right? It depends, I would say, as it always goes, right? Devil's in the details. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of jump right in. Once I figure out where my mouse is without a computer. There we go. So we're going to start with really what can be automated. Moving files, folder to folder, server to server. Opening, closing, and renaming files, right? So maybe you get an extract out of some system that you need to name to your corporate standard because it doesn't come that way from wherever you're getting that file, or from your clients, or from customers, or from suppliers, or whomever, right? Opening, logging in, and closing websites or web applications. Kind of key bread and butter for RPA. Really, really, really good stuff. And since there's more than one or two websites out there, you can automatically see there's a limitless potential essentially for that. As well, there's any web application that uses a browser, or any application that uses a browser to interface with it. So for example, ERP systems. A lot of the ERP systems use a browser, even if they're located locally internally on your own hardware, right? Entering and extracting data. Key bread and butter again of RPA. Opening a file, going to this column, be it in an Excel spreadsheet, be it in a Word table, finding row 6 and extracting the value and saving that and putting it in some other system, right? Swivel chairing, bread and butter. Inspecting the data, right? And detecting errors. Nice because it doesn't require a human, right? Humans miss things. A robot's going to subtract 2, multiply by 6, and see if the value equals this every single time the same exact way. So really, really nice for that. Making calculations, obviously. So a computer's pretty good at multiplying and dividing and subtracting and adding and this, that, and the other. But RPA allows you to do that across multiple systems and bring data together from multiple different sources and do calculations on it. Not just multiplication and mathematics calculations, but counting the number of characters in a string value, right? How many letters are in that particular word, that sort of thing, from some system, and then do something different depending upon the length of it, right? Making if-then decisions. So even though it's not machine learning and it's not AI, you still can program in rules-based decision making. So if this condition occurs in your automation, then do this. Otherwise, go down the alternate path, right? And then I think one of the incredible, powerful things about that is any combination of those things all tied together in any sequence that it needs to be tied together, right? So in some situations, you might need to open a file and then go log into a website. And then in other situations, you might need to open a website, get a value, do a calculation, and then go open a file and save something off, right? So as you can see, your mind immediately starts thinking about things automatically that you might do day to day. That, okay, so I could then go over here, do this, check that, calculate this, go to this system, and on and on and on and on and on. So kind of way leads on to way automatically. You just start snowballing these ideas. Yes? No. I want this as interactive as possible. So please, we're going to pause at the end of every slide, but jump in whenever.
Sorry, I thought you were.
Yeah, we are.
So is this done in line? So, and again, maybe this is kind of a ridiculous question. Mm-hmm. Is a calculation or a data inspection, is that done in line in terms of?
Do you mean sequentially?
Yes.
Yeah.
While we're we need a calculation to enter the next field.
Yeah.
For example. That's done there, or is it data extracted to be done in a different process?
So think about it this way, right? You could do that multiple ways. You could say, I want to take this value, the first row, let's say, in an Excel file, and take the first cell and then go do some process. and come back with a calculation and write that calculated value off. Or you could say, go to that Excel file, grab me that column, bring that whole column in, and I'm going to do it essentially as a batch. It just depends on where you want to put the loop, right? Is it do it every single time after every thing? Or do you do one big thing all at once and then a smaller thing at the end, if that makes sense, right? I'm trying to come up with a good example, but that's the thing. It depends on how you kind of program it. Mm-hmm.
So how is this any different from automated web-based testing tools?
So in theory, it's not, but I would say the key thing here is that it's not just web.
Okay.
That's the big difference.
Can you elaborate? So like what
Absolutely.
interfaces
Yep.
can you apply?
Almost all of the RPA platforms have integration, for example, with Excel, where they're actually going behind the scenes and kind of manipulating the XML file that Excel is. So they've got that integration built in. However, they also have, and different platforms call it something different, but they have tools built in to where you actually can say, I want to go inspect the Windows identifier of this thing on this application. So if that makes sense, where you could go in and say, I'm in Outlook, and I want to click the new email button. So what these tools generally have is something, a lot of them call it an inspector, where you say, I want to run the inspector, and then you go over and you click on that thing, and it says it's class this, ID this, or name this, or blah, 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 right? Some Windows unintelligible thing, but the software knows what to do with it, right? We'll touch on that a little bit later, but it's similar to web-based stuff where you're looking for XPaths, right? So in the web, you say, go to XPath this, and set a value, click a button, or whatever, right? That's where the tool becomes different than straight just web software testing. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I think what you're saying is that it's, at least for products that market themselves as RPA tools,
Mm-hmm.
they have everything kind of collated into
Exactly.
one tool set.
That's right, and it allows you to, and I think it's part of what really is making RPA kind of the hot topic, is that it's not talking just to a web-based tool. It's not just talking to a SQL database. It's dealing with this application and that application and this application, and you name it. You can kind of basically interface with, in theory, anything.
Jim,
Yeah,
it acts like a human would.
that's right.
I always tell my clients, if you could sit at your desk and do it over and over again, regardless of how many systems are involved, you can put it in RPA.
Right.
So it's not limited to certain things, as Jim's getting at, talks to Excel, talks to any kind of tools that you would typically pull data from and act, and then you just build it, and it looks just like a user.
Yep.
Logs into a system just like a user ID and password, just like you.
Yep. And that's what also makes it, I think, pretty attractive to the C-level folks, is that it's not intrusive. It doesn't require you to overlay a lot of additional software, or additional APIs, or additional interfaces. It simply uses what's there already, and you tell it, okay, Sally clicks this button, and then she does this, and then she does that. You tell the bot, click that button, and then do this, and then do that, and the bot does it just like Sally would do it.
So when you install this agent
Mm-hmm.
that does this, do you have to have, I guess, a dedicated environment for that agent to run off and do these?
Sure.
We'll just call it manual API.
Bots, automations, whatever you want to call it. We call them kind of bots and automations interchangeably. Scripts, we call them sometimes. The different platform providers are slightly different, I believe, but the one that we use, you set up essentially what's called the control tower server. And that control tower is where you manage your bots. You say, here's the business process I want to run. I want to put 7 bots on it out of my 12 max, right? And I want it to run at 6 a.m. And here's the inputs. Here's the script. The script defines what the output are. And at 6 a.m., by God, as long as the server's up, it kicks off, and those 7 bots start running through that input file and start chugging along and doing their work. And at the end of it, depending upon the output, there's some output that generally some human's going to do something with, right? Because otherwise you'd have the bot do whatever it needs to do with it, right? That kind of thing. So there is a bit of a hardware layer that you would have to put on, but I also know that I believe, and David, you might be able to answer this for sure, but I think some of the providers have cloud-based infrastructure, if you will, right?
It can run on physical, virtual, it can run on desktop.
Right, yeah, of course, yeah.
Any one of the above.
Yep.
And you can set up whichever way it works. A lot of times you virtualize the server and put it on that.
Yep.
As Jim alluded to, sometimes you have a development environment, production environment, control room.
Or whatever you're going to call it. Yeah, all the lingo is a little bit different, but they're all essentially, a centralized point where you manage all of your automations and your bots. And you manage schedules and all that.
And so you'll have an environment where you might, as Jim alluded to, you might create 50 bots, but then you have an engine over here that runs them.
That's right.
Right, and that engine might sit someplace different than where you're building them. Probably will.
And so it's important to remember this too, is that because it is mimicking the person, you essentially have to treat it almost as if you would treat an employee, right? You have to give it a username and password or use someone else's because it's got to log into things, right? It has to have access to your network hard drives, right? So that it can access input files or write output files too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It has to mimic the human, right? That's where your coding comes in. Since it's not true machine learning or AI, it's I don't want to call it hard coded, but it essentially is, right? You tell it this is the process I want you to follow, and you program in your if-then decisions to make sure that you've got a nice solid algorithm that are going to handle as many of the edge cases and exceptions as you possibly can find during testing and development. And you say, all right, when you hit it and it's blue, by gosh, do this. And when it's red, do this. But if somebody, decides now it's going to be yellow, it's probably not going to work, right? So that's where the design and the development comes really important. And that's also back to a little bit to should every process be automated? We'll kind of touch on that later, but if the color scheme is changing constantly, then you basically have to start thinking about, well, how can I tell it when it changes and kind of build something in that it's going to be smart enough to understand that when it sees the new color, oh, I need to go look at this reference document and go see what I need to do now, that kind of thing.
I don't want to.
That's okay.
Continue. I have a lot more. But.
I can tell. Yeah, we'll keep going here. So, how do you identify a process for automation? And we kid about this, but it's kind of true, right? Go find the boredest employee in your company. That's because they're doing the most boring, menial work possible, right? Click, button, send, open file, copy. Oh, God. When his head starts hitting the keyboard and he starts making mistakes because he's falling asleep, automate that process, right? Because that's right. If it doesn't take a lot of brain power, it's probably not anything that really isn't already rules-based that you can't automate, right? So it's kind of also important to think about how big a process do you want to take on at one point, right? You don't necessarily want to say, I'm going to automate the end-to-end sending out a quote all the way through sending the invoice in a process that takes 4 months as one single process. That's going to be a hard plate of food to chew at one time, right? Maybe you want to segment that up a little bit and take it in more manageable chunks, right? So what we try to do is we try to find something that's going to give us a really good return for the customer as defined by their success criteria, right? So what's their overall kind of goal here? Is it straight cost reduction, right? That's a different kind of criteria than it is for somebody who's looking to relieve workers from doing that menial work so that they can go do more value-add work. They don't want those people doing data entry. They want them selling and producing additional revenue, right? So we try to focus on where is it that you want to kind of target these things, and that's where we dive in first. And then you can kind of go off to some of the other cases, but it's really about getting what the business needs first, not necessarily what's the easiest, not necessarily what's the biggest time saver, because those are probably your more complex processes to automate anyway, and you're probably going to take longer, you're not going to see as quick a return, that sort of thing, right? So can you think about in your business something that you would go, wow, yeah, if we could automate that, that's kind of a nice, relatively quick win? Sure.
Give me me some order of magnitude difficulty in, so we get a lot of emails that are machine generated. So it's an output from someone else's server.
Yep.
Sending us a standard email, and there's a set process for what files need to be saved from that email, and what entries need to be logged into a database from that email.
Sure.
Is that a super easy thing to automate, or is that a super hard thing to automate?
So just so everyone heard. So it's the question is what kind of level of effort is it to automate call it an automatic email handling, where you're getting automated messages from other systems.
And if it doesn't match one of the automated messages, then it goes to a human.
Sure.
But otherwise.
In general, as long as it's if company X sends it this standard way every time, and you don't have 10,000 company X's that are all different templates.
Yeah, we're talking 2 to 3.
Oh, relatively simple. Yeah. You might have to do some testing, again, edge cases, that sort of thing. But yeah, in general, relatively easy.
So that's a good use case.
That is a good use case, so long as it's something that's going to produce some return, right? If it takes a human 2 minutes a day to handle those,
well,
maybe not, right?
In our case, it's 2 humans all day long.
That's probably a really good use case. 2 FTEs, something with very structured data with minimal variation, checks the boxes. Sorry, did you have?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'll let you get to some of the examples.
Yeah, why don't I get to some of the examples, and that might help, okay? Sorry, I'm getting sun blind up here. So, real world examples, our customers, law firm. So what they do is they handle patents for their clients. They register them with the Patent Trade Office. They monitor all the patent and trade communications coming out of the Patent and Trade Office system. They, of course, have to keep track of all that in their own document management system, keep the client informed, et cetera, right? So if you can imagine, the person's job is they come in the morning, they have to log into the Patent and Trade Office system. They then have to search for, show me everything that was communicated in the last day. They then have to download all those files. Back to an example I gave where the naming convention was different. The Patent and Trade Office naming is nowhere near what most companies would name their files. So they have to rename the file in a very standardized format, something like date and ID number, that sort of thing. Save those to their hard drive, to their network drive, go into their document management system, log into that, find the folder for the given patent, i.e. the client, upload the document into the document management system. Totally manual process done every day that's 100% automatable with no questions asked. All of that's really kind of just bread and butter RPA. So you can see it hit on logging in, opening websites, downloading files, manipulating files, renaming them, moving them from one network drive to another, because it's got to move it from the download folder to the applicable folder on the network drive, going into another system, uploading the data, right? Really checks a lot of those boxes on that first page of all of those things that RPA can do. And relatively, hopefully, right, simple. It's pretty rules-based. If this doesn't happen, then that's an error, throw the error, that kind of thing. Pretty straightforward.
That's a question.
Uh-huh.
So in that example, like how long would that automation take to do? So
To develop or to run?
to develop, right? So once you've identified the use case,
Mm-hmm.
is it 2 weeks? Is it 5 months?
Oh, no. This is hours, not weeks. Yeah. So this was 50 hours? 55? Yeah, something like that.
And then depending obviously on what product you're using, like what's the cost of implementation of that for a law firm?
Well, if you think about it, if they've already bought the RPA platform, it's just the services time that we took to develop it. Yeah, that's really the only cost. I mean, over and above the RPA platform itself. So.
But what are the typical maintenance and operating costs?
It's a good question. We'll probably table that because trust me, I will talk about maintenance. Okay?
So this is something that you can't just
Yep, you can't fire and forget.
monitor it.
You cannot fire and forget. That's right.
And control towers.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. We will definitely talk about maintenance.
Bots do break down.
They do break.
But they are self-monitored.
Yes.
in certain ways.
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But when the environment changes,
That's right.
what kind of error detection, what kind you put in there, they'll crash. So you need somebody who understands what's going on to go in and fix it.
Yep. Simple example is, right, the Patent and Trade Office just totally changes and revamps their website. All the XPaths change. Oops. But, having said that, the human process breaks too. You just don't, a lot of people don't really realize that, oh, the bot broke, it's going to cost us $1 million to fix it kind of thing. But the human process broke too. Hopefully they're smart enough to, okay, so what changed? How do I maneuver differently? But they still have to be retrained, so to speak, right? So, but we definitely will come back to maintenance, okay? Another real world example is a regional bank that we're dealing with. So they process loans. No big surprise there. They process loans. They take an Excel document, load it into their what they call their core system, and then they have to take 5 ungodly text files, because bank systems are generally old, and they produce files that are nice and easy to read by human eyes and are really horrible to normalize the data. And they review those text files against the original file to make sure that it got entered correctly. We're automating the process to totally remove all of that human review. Okay? Again, opening files, checking for errors, doing data comparisons, logging into systems, et cetera, et cetera. Check, check, check. All of those boxes that RPA is really good for. Perfect use case right there.
But Jim, those are structured text files.
Not really structured. Oops, sorry. Forgot my mouse was not next to my computer. So let's look at so it looks pretty good at first glance, doesn't it? Nice, column-based, right? Clean. Until you realize that as you're scrolling down, what happened here? What is this kind of like in the middle of all this, right? So relatively structured, but we found that variances up to like 12 different standard document sections in each one of these text files. So a little bit more complexity, certainly still doable, but we still have to go in and figure out that, oh, okay, when we see this, we have to parse it this way. Structured files would be, oh man, I'd love those.
I think the point I was trying to get to is that these tools do not handle natural language processing.
No.
Text files that are like paragraphs.
No.
That's not
Yeah.
this category of tools.
No, that's not what they do. That's right.
But is there,
They do OCR.
When you said text files,
Yeah. Yeah, they do OCR though, for example.
is there anything in the pipeline to add in NLP?
No, that's what the other, they do that, it's just not at RPA kind of level yet. I mean, it's our kind of thinking that eventually the AI kind of comes down lower and lower into that entry level kind of tools, but that's not going to be anytime soon.
So like in data ingestion, the only sources that can really take are like semi-structured files, you know?
Not really. As long as you can write a rule to handle it, it could handle the most ridiculously complex text file that you could imagine. As long as you've got a way to tell a person, when you see this, do that, you can program the bot to, when you see this, do that. It might be very complex, don't get me wrong, but it's still doable.
But it's not reading and understanding.
No.
Okay.
It's not reading, oh, this is, I don't know, this is the color yellow, so I'm going to display the word yellow, or vice versa. Naturally, it doesn't get that. If you programmed it to, it would, but not naturally.
So like pattern recognition is cool. Like if you can write a regular expression to grab the data you want.
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Yep. So I want to just kind of keep moving a little bit along here. So how to actually now kind of think about, is this a good candidate for automation or not? And what we do is we focus on these 4 main areas. LOE and volume, and the LOE is the current human level of effort. So how long does this take currently for the business to do it? And how much do they do, right? Not going to read through every one of them, but looking at the size, how much volume is it? Is it consistent volume? Is there all sorts of peaks and peaks and valleys in the volume? Is it a large amount of handling time, right? Does it take 20 minutes to handle one and you do 10,000 a week kind of thing? That's a good one, right? Complexity, and this is probably one of the more tricky ones to kind of quote measure, but we look at things like, what's the team structure? Is it a single department that owns the process end to end? Is it multiple departments? Do you have to get multiple buy-ins to automate? Do you have difference of opinions, et cetera, on what the rules are, right? That's going to make it more complex. Location, obviously, multiple time zones, multiple geographic locations. You've got all those kinds of challenges. Is it structured input data or unstructured? What sort of outputs do you want to do? How many systems or sources of inputs are you dealing with here? If you've got a process that is interfacing with 30 different inputs and 50 different systems, that sort of thing, maybe that's not number one on the list. Maybe you kind of put that down a little bit lower, right? Or break it up. And then typical process breakage, right? So what makes this process break when people are doing it? Because you're going to want to train the bot to recognize that breakage and do what we call fail gracefully, right? We don't want it to just crash. Recognize the issue, email somebody and tell them there's a problem, stop, let the problem be fixed, resume, kind of thing. Regulatory risk and privacy is important, right? So if you've got a lot of things that have to be done really, really quickly first thing in the morning, right? You want this stuff to be done as fast as possible because the executive need it or your clients need it. Well, maybe that's a good one to automate because the bot will do it if the data is ready to handle it. They don't have to wait till they wake up and have their cup of coffee. They can start at 1 a.m. and it'll be done and ready when somebody needs it. Quality. When people review those text files and have to compare it to the Excel file, as you can imagine, probably really easy for somebody to miss something. Quality almost increases on every case on these things as soon as you take the human out of the equation, right? Information security in terms of personal identifiable information. Do we have to worry about any sort of those kind of issues? And lastly is quality of life and financial, right? Quality of life is something that a lot of companies might want to kind of say they do, but maybe they don't. But if you think about it, that poor guy or gal that's sitting at their desk doing their work like this every single day. One, if they're not looking for a job now, they are soon. If they're the only one that knows how to do it, you're in trouble. Why not try to improve the quality of life for these people and let them do something that's a little more meaningful for them, can maybe increase your revenue, right? It's really important. Success criteria, financial, right? If you can realize a big gain monetarily, let's face it, that's a pretty hard argument to poo-poo down, right? If you're all of a sudden going to get a 5-figure savings on this, or you're going to save 2 FTEs a year in time, everything else might kind of take a back seat, or at least be taken with a yeah, we'll accept that it's a little bit riskier if we can get that big reward. Any questions on this? And there's no real right or wrong way these things are quantified or grouped or anything like that. Every company is going to be slightly different, right? Your company might be really risk averse. So if it's really risky to do it, I don't want to do it. I want to do something that's very, very stable where there's almost no risk for failure. Another one might say, no, if I could cut, hate to say it, 5 FTEs worth of cost, I all of a sudden I can compete now. I can compete in this market space where I couldn't before. It's all going to be a little bit different for each place, right? So, any questions there? Or do you have any other ideas of how you would kind of think about those things?
I would add one thing to the list, Jim. I'm not sure whether maybe it falls under your typical breakage process, but I would add frequency of change.
Yeah, variability, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of where that falls is if you've got a website that's changing on a weekly basis, you're probably going to want to keep that part manual and try to automate everything else, right?
That keeps on changing.
Or a partner that keeps on changing their format, yes.
RPA is actually quite attractive if you're risk averse,
Mhm.
because typically you develop it in parallel. So there's no intrusion,
No intrusion.
you get it working, and then you make a decision.
Yep. The risk I was referring to was to a certain degree what Dave was talking about, where are you willing to risk that you might have to maintain it every 2 months if the format of a file changes, or if the website changes. So there's a little bit of risk there, right? It's kind of, that's what I mean. They're not all kind of exactly defined in a nice, clean way like that. You really kind of look at them holistically.
I would just add probably one or two other things that are related to this, and that is that, like with the bank that we're working with, the processes they've automated so far have had a very low ROI.
Mhm.
And they've done that intentionally because what they're trying to do is they're trying to introduce automation in a way that's not threatening to employees. So they're taking things that might only take somebody an hour a day, but it's a real pain and there's high quality problems. So they're automating that, and that is not displacing 2 FTEs. They're not disrupting their organization, but people are seeing that come in, they're seeing it develop, and they're going, wow, that's really good, that works. And they sort of are, so they're starting to work on, there's a whole social aspect of RPA, right? How do your employees react to this? How's the company going to react to it? How are key stakeholders going to react to it? So in this case, they're taking a very strategic approach to really try to implement this in a way that's not threatening, but that demonstrates the real advantages of RPA. So in that case, you know, we'll do the assessment for them, but they may be coming up with processes that don't have the greatest ROI, but they're still important in their larger plan to put in RPA. And then the other thing is it's not just about kind of saving FTEs or cutting costs. Like if you get back to the law firm example, you've got a law clerk, whatever, spending 2 hours a day on the patent and trade office site. So that person's going, really, I went to law school for this? And the law firm really isn't getting much value out of it. If that person had 2 extra hours in their day, guarantee you there's work they could do to help out the other lawyers, to do things that are more meaningful to them. So it's kind of a win-win. It's not about saving so much. Say they're not going to stop paying that person those 2 hours or 1 hour, whatever a day, but they are going to get higher quality work from that person, and that person is going to be more engaged in their job.
It's all true, but how do you sell that? Because ROI is what we sell it on, right? We sell our services on ROI. So we trying to keep people happy, one employee happy, my team, right? It's not gonna help me sell it, you know?
I hear you. I'm in the same boat, but I'm saying not everybody that we're running into is just all about ROI. There are other considerations. I'm a good example in that with my company, we implemented RPA and didn't let anybody go. And in fact, before we did it, I made a commitment to the whole team that no one was going to get laid off, that we were doing this to grow the company. So companies that are growth-minded are looking at this and saying, guys, we can do so much more than we're doing today if we had this capability.
So, in comparison to other RPA tools, you know, how is there a big cost differentiation from implementing what's RPA is promoting than to other traditional business process automation tools? I guess what's the cost differentiation there? Is it easier?
I don't think it's a fair apples to apples comparison, right?
I actually don't know that I'm qualified to
PMS
answer that.
tools like
Good
RPA
question.
and
Yeah.
Omega, is that what you're referring
Of
to?
course, now own our tools.
Well, they're getting a partnership.
Well,
Yeah.
the RPA and other tools are there, right?
Those are more BPM.
That's right.
They're different type of
Yeah,
tool.
BPM, yeah.
They're BPMS tools.
Right.
They sit within the infrastructure, not within the user interface.
That's right. And they're typically not multi-system focused, right? Again, they're focused on being the tool that manages a process entirely within that tool, right? not doing a process that spans multiple systems, multiple different user interfaces, multiple inputs and outputs. I think that's the key differentiator. So a cost comparison, one-to-one, kind of not really doable, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, then you talked about, well, we kind of briefly touched on maintenance and operations. So, like, obviously, you know, just to monitor quality, you're going to need someone who's trained on these tools and the ability to see the big picture in terms of the process and your tactical opportunities of where, you know, things need to be automated.
Sure.
And have to sit on it.
Yes and no, I would say. So first off, I think I'm hearing you're talking about someone that's kind of leading the RPA program inside a company more than just developing the automations.
No, well, combination of both, because I feel like with these tools, you'll need like an analyst to stay in the office.
Oh, okay. I would probably disagree with that to a certain degree.
Okay.
And here's why. Does the analyst sit in the office and monitor the human that's doing the process? Or do they simply look at the end result, and so long as the end result meets a quality level and acceptance criteria, so to speak, they did their job correctly? Fair statement, right?
Yeah.
The bot is just mimicking the human. Just remember that, right? So if they were taking a Excel document and simply transferring the contents of a row of data from the Excel document into a system that had roughly a one-to-one field map and saying, click, go, and submit sort of thing, right? Either, one, the software has checks in it to make sure dates are in date fields and numbers are in number fields and things like that. But remember, so long as you say this field is where Sally puts in this field in the tool, the bot's doing exactly that. So as long as that process is defined, it's checked.
I think in more terms of like in fluid environments when, you know, one component of your, I guess, automation, there's the data inputs, the structure changes.
Yes.
And you're going to need someone there to, you know, assist with.
That's maintenance, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I-
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got some thoughts on this. There's sort of when people start out and automate things, first of all, a lot of the RPA vendors are kind of saying, hey, look, anybody can do this. And you hit the record button, click a few things, hit stop, and you're good. And that, in my opinion, is a huge misrepresentation. It also encourages people kind of to do this sort of one-off on their desk. The problem is these things do require maintenance over time. And if you only got one or two automations, you know, on somebody's desktop, those things are going to break over time. That person's going to leave. Something's going to happen. That's not a sustainable long-term process. So I think that when a company invests in automation, I think it's a bigger decision than that. I think they need to say, we're going to make this a part of our company the same way we need to have, you know, IT resources to handle our IT infrastructure. We need to have, you know, access to lawyers to handle kind of the legal part of our company. Automation just becomes another function within the company that needs to be managed. It's not a, you know, just do it and then, you know, set it and forget it. And if you have a large enough organization and you have invested enough in automation, then it makes sense for you to actually have your own core team. In much the same way that some companies have their own internal IT department, other companies outsource that and have somebody do that for them. But either way, if you're going to do that, it needs to be managed and it needs to be a function that's maintained within the organization.
So, understanding that everything is going to be variable based on the specific situation, do you have any kind of best practice or rule of thumb in the sense of, given a certain level of effort to develop the bot, how much do you then budget for from a maintenance perspective?
You know, it varies a lot based on the variability of the inputs.
No doubt.
So there are certain things that you automate, they're just rock solid. They just run, and you can just kind of forget about them. We do a lot with my research company. We do a lot with websites from the big telecom service providers, so Verizon, Comcast. These guys are changing their websites all the time. I mean, they have people that are focused on optimizing that buy flow, which means they're changing their websites all the time, which means that on a fairly regular basis, every 2 to 3 weeks, something's going to happen with one or other of those sites, and somebody's going to have to go in. Usually it takes 10, 20 minutes, and they rerun it, and that's easy. But it depends process to process, and that gets back to this assessment. If you're looking at a process and it seems like it's just going to be, there's going to be too much variability, that might be a red flag to say, maybe we don't want to do this. The maintenance cost might just outweigh the benefit of this.
But like Andrew, I think in your case, though, if you've got a person maintaining it,
Yeah.
and by writing it, you've taken the work away from 8 people, allowed them to do something else, it's worth it.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Because there are a lot of people that were using that same capability.
Yep.
Right.
So follow up on this, and I haven't seen, you may have other slides, so I'm not sure.
It's okay. That's okay.
I'm stopping you in the middle. But first of all, most processes are not just human, right? They are sort of now mostly processes are semi-automated, semi-human, right? So that's one question I have around that. And second question I have is, what sort of typically in your experience, what kind of process have you automated? Because this list looks more like sort of IT kind of list, okay? But from business side, because that's where the value will come ultimately, right? What sort of processes have you seen
Sure.
that people have demanded to automate?
Sure, I can hit a few other examples. So we're dealing with a drug treatment center, and they hold treatment meetings where they treat their patients. And at the end of that, someone has to take the list of attendees, and they have to go into their billing system, and they have to put that into the billing system so that either the patient or some insurance company or government agency can be billed. We've automated that. They simply drop the file in a folder. The automation takes care of all the rest. It checks for errors, makes sure the names are right, makes sure that the person that was supposed to be leading the meeting was in a list of approved people who can hold the meeting, make sure that the right codes are used, et cetera, et cetera. Another case that we're doing for the drug treatment center is we're taking and validating all of their employees' medical licenses. So we're going out to the state websites and validating that the licenses are current, that their expiration date is still in the future, and we're then prompting for certain emails to be sent out to say, hey, you're going to be within 3 months of your license expiring, right? So it's those kind of business processes, not necessarily some sort of software processes, that provide a lot of value because they're just being done by a person with really no value add. It's simply doing something because that's the only way they can do it right now.
Thank you. That was a good example.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Any other comments or ideas?
I keep having it.
Yeah.
So let's talk.
You're going to be at the next one, aren't you?
I don't know. So implementation timelines, right? So let's just say we identify an opportunity, right? And we wanted to design an automated automation in the process. So how long does it take after we get the idea on simple projects to deploy automation into the production environment?
Yep.
And at the same time for more complex,
Sure.
you said you needed programmers to go in to do the data ingestion and wrangling and all that.
So let's,
visualization.
I'm with you. So development and deployment timeline, general estimates for a relatively simple process, and then one that's more complex. So how we do it is we typically have the users walk us through the process, and we video record it over a screen share. So that we've got it, so that we can go back to it, kind of constantly be checking things as we're then. Next step, we develop a workflow. So good old Visio, process, decision, what happens here, et cetera, et cetera. We then take that and we go back to the client and we give them a rough ROI in terms of when they can expect their investment to be repaid, in terms of cost savings, purely on cost savings, in general, in terms of the number, but we of course talk about quality of life, employee morale, et cetera, et cetera. That all takes, in general, depending upon the length of the process that we're recording, say like an hour in the first meeting to maybe 2 or 3 hours, depending upon how long it is. Maybe another 3, 4, 5 hours to document the workflow, and maybe another hour to come up with an LOE estimate with one of my developers, and then write up the documentation and present it to the client. We hold the go, no-go meeting. If it's a go, so now if you think about that, we're at, call it roughly a day kind of thing in total time. If we're given a go decision, on a simple process, I would say we're probably averaging, very ballpark, 40 hours of development time. Okay? That's to get to the client's acceptance period. That's not necessarily finished, but it's getting it through development testing to where we think we've met the success criteria as defined in the project review, right? Client acceptance can be short and sweet, or it can be long. Who really knows, right? If you're doing it internally for yourself, you probably can judge how long until people feel confident that this is working. And importantly, that you've caught all the edge cases. Because invariably, almost always, you'll automate it exactly like that. Never happens. Don't worry about that. And they'll do user acceptance testing, and that happens. You're giggling. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's almost impossible to hit every single edge case every single time out of the gate. You just can't do it.
You know, the really good thing about RPA is that it's a phenomenal opportunity to use Agile.
It really is, yeah.
You know, you just kind of say, okay, I'm going to go for the big bang first, and I'll worry about the errors later.
Yep.
Right? And so
Yep.
you roll out the 80% of it, and then you say, okay, I'll start picking up the errors as they happen, and you go back,
Yep.
bot breaks, you add some code, and you just kind of add functionality. I mean, I'm not a huge Agile person, but I'll tell you, that is
Yep.
the one place it absolutely makes sense.
Yep. And if particularly when it's internal, when you're not paying
Right.
by the hour for a consultant to do it, but if it's all internal, yeah, that really works because you can get into testing really quickly. That's provided you've got a nice structured set of code that you're not going to have to fundamentally change and go, oh boy, I screwed that up. I got to go all the way back to the beginning and start that whole thing all over again, right? But if you're doing this again on your own or inside your own internal business, you start establishing best practices really, really quickly. We did it within a couple of months, I would say, of even just starting to do the process assessments and starting to develop that. Yeah, there needs to be some pretty good best practices here.
So another way to answer that question is in general it's short.
Mm-hmm.
These implementation timelines, when you compare to software development projects and everything else, it's very short. The other thing to think about is you can always break a larger process down into smaller pieces. So the patent example, that step one of downloading the stuff from the patent office, uploading it into the our management system, that's just part of the process. That's where they want to start. But the next thing is they want the bot to go in on a weekly basis and pull down from the management system what's everything by lawyer and send an email out to each lawyer at the end of each week with a report. And then I think there's another step that they want to do after that. You don't need to take the whole thing and do it all at once.
That's the Agile piece, right?
You can take one piece of it, automate that, get that working, and then add the next piece on it, add the next piece. So in general, like a long project, end to end for us would be about 2 months. Mostly it goes faster than that.
Yep.
Well, what I like about it is that it's completely systems agnostic.
Yeah.
So you don't have to modify your production system that might benefit an entire enterprise, and you can just tailor, your solution in just one department, which is could be
Yep.
unique and a good way to get requisitions your way.
Yep. And it's also, I mean, if you're changing a massive system, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it's huge for legacy systems.
Oh yeah.
Legacy systems.
Yeah, legacy systems that you just literally just don't want to touch because they work, don't mess with them kind of thing. Perfect for that.
So Jim, there's underlying data that's not always seen by the user interface. I've done a lot of this in healthcare where we use scripts. And again, scripts can run for years and we never touch them because in healthcare, if you change the UI, you've got nothing on the hands of the clients. But we have other systems that are continuously having to be maintained by these scripts. And this is old, Boston Workstation, Microsoft type scripts. I'm thinking that the technology is much improved since then, but I don't know yet. What do you think about that? I guess what I'm curious about is that underlying data. Can you get to that, or do you need access to the vendor to get to that?
So I'd say it depends on the application. If it's a web application, you can, because you can access essentially the HTML in the background, right? So you can get in there and you can say, what's this field's ID? What's its font? You know, all of those kinds of things. You can get to the CSS behind the scenes. If it's a desktop application, it's just going to depend, right? Is it anywhere that you can, quote, read it, but with a computer, essentially, right? That inspector, it just depends.
How about a green screen?
A green screen? Yeah, doubtful. I could probably tell you it's green. We've actually also started looking at automating Flash websites for a client. Yeah, fun. And they say it couldn't be done, but, well, because it's a Flash site. So we're actually going to be doing that soon, too. We are right at 7:25. So I do have an automation that'll run. It takes about 7-8 minutes if you're interested in watching it. I don't know how much you're going to get out of it because it's relatively, I mean, have you ever watched somebody do their job?
Is it a video?
No?
Actually, it's just something that's on the desk.
So it's
First of all, it's not the most interesting thing to do to watch a bot run.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's working in the background and you're just going, is anything happening? So just want to set expectations.
That's right.
As low as I can before Jim hits play.
Yeah, have you ever watched somebody do their job?
This is the WorkFusion editor for you.
It's kind of boring, right? Remember the guy that's fallen asleep at his desk? That's what you're going to be watching the bot do. So you can see basically we group things, keep things kind of nice and tidy, that sort of thing. I'm just going to close everything that doesn't need to be running here. And stop laughing, Dave.
Now how often do demos work? Let's see.
I never said that word, though. I never said it before I started because that's usually the kiss of death.
So this is the number of steps. You can see something's happening.
Yep.
This bot is on step 14 of 978.
Now, the 978 is not the number of discrete steps that everything is going to be done. Remember, there's error checking in there. There's loops, and there's comments, and there's all this stuff. So it's, quote, 978 lines long, but you might only execute 400 of them, depending upon the if-else, right? And what this actually does is it's yep. So it's the scenario is that you've got instructors around the world teaching courses. They and actually steals from the healthcare. They keep meeting lists or a course attendee lists of people that need to be billed for the course. They drop those into a network drive, and then the automation picks those up and puts them into an executive dashboard reporting system and puts them into the quote billing system so that they can actually be billed. So here what we're doing is we're starting a log file. That's something else that we've kind of built in as our best practices. We're keeping a log file of all the bot's actions. And as it runs through certain things, it'll start writing, I logged into SharePoint successfully. I read the list of meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So while this runs, please ask any additional questions that you might have. So before we get there, this is, again, ticking those boxes, right? Opening applications, Outlook, Excel. Opening websites, SharePoint, logging into SharePoint. Opening or reading through a list of files, processing the files in a loop, right? Opening those files, reading and extracting data, going out to the website and writing the data. You kind of smile. Is it actually, okay, I thought it was writing some gibberish or something. I was like, is it writing in some sort of strange language here? So again, if you think about that initial list of what can automation do, check, 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 right? If-then decisions, error checking. We have it checking to say if there is a certain field that doesn't have a value, kick that file off to the side and put it in a needs review folder because something's wrong. I can't process it. So that's in the case where the course name is missing, for example. You can't bill for a course if the course name's not there, right? I think it checks for things like if there's no attendees in the attendee list. So why you can't really process a course that hadn't. All the reading of the files is still in the background. The only thing that's in the foreground is the log files. So you can see it's actually reading, it's writing the things, copying from the clipboard, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's not the most exciting thing to watch.
Is this the log file or
Yeah. This is the log file that we put it here just so that you can actually see something on the screen.
When this process runs again, because you're already 3/4 of the way through, we know it takes 32 seconds.
Yeah, you absolutely can get metrics from this to see how good your bots are operating.
The next log into another Excel file?
No, it would stay in that same log file for the current run, if you will. Because you could schedule that bot to run every 5 minutes if you wanted to, right? If you have tons of things coming in, I think you had the example of emails. Well, if you're just getting emails all day long, have it reading that Outlook inbox, have it read it every 30 minutes, process all of them, move those off to the processed folder, shut down, wait until the 30-minute mark kicks off again, start up again, nothing there to read, don't do nothing, close down, more to process, run, right?
And Jim, there are many, many ways of triggering them to run, right? It doesn't have to be based on time.
Nope.
A folder, you can have a file appear in a folder that triggers a bot.
Exactly. Essentially, you could have a bot always, quote, listening to see, wait, if this thing appears, go. Yep. And this is why this is really kind of exciting, is it's to see kind of these questions come up as you immediately start making connections, right? I can see it's hitting you. You're going, okay, so I could do that, and then okay, yeah, so you could do this. It's really simple because it hits on what you do or what a person does now, which is not hard to kind of imagine because you've seen it done, right?
It documents a lot better than humans do.
Say again?
It documents a lot better than humans do.
Oh yeah, I can't remember, one of our customers said, I can just tell the bot what to do, they just shut up and do it. Or something to that effect, right? It's like there's no but why, it just does it.
There's no going back asking why you did it this way.
That's right. Why did you do it that way? Well, because you told me to do it that way. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know where we are. I think we're probably getting close to the end here. Yep. So this is pretty close. So
quick question on platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what platform is actually
So
now?
this is WorkFusion RPA Express.
Okay.
Okay. There is there's dozens out there, right? But
So how do you choose?
so I would say that's probably outside the scope of this meeting.
Is there a matrix that anybody's put together?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Several major parties.
Gartner reports, Forrester.
Depends on what you're trying to do.
That's right.
And your organization, right? How much engine you need behind it.
Yeah, as always, it depends.
80% of our work.
Yeah, there's a Gartner report coming out. I want to say it's April 4th or April 5th, somewhere around there, that's got the current RPA landscape all over again. Say again, sorry. Forrester Wave, right.
It just came out, I think, in the fourth quarter of their ranking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're usually 6
Yep.
Question about your bots. Can your bots get blacklisted somehow in certain websites?
Ah, great question. Can your people?
Well, people certainly not.
Why?
But with
In general,
the speed of
yeah.
the tool.
That's a great point. So you sometimes want to slow the bot down,
Yeah.
right?
They'll detect you.
Right.
But if you're talking about recaptures, recaptures will often catch a bot. I mean,
That's right.
Google's pretty smart about their algorithm. The way the mouse moves across the screen and everything else is used to determine whether it's going to throw up a captcha. And a captcha can stop a bot. There are ways around that. There are services that you can, integrate with your automation that essentially solve those things in real time. So, like most problems, there's a solution. That's not to say that there won't be a bigger problem, but it is an issue, especially with customer-facing websites.
Yep.
So is this the pace of the? Sorry.
This is just the pace of this one.
Okay.
We do have some weights in there. I mean,
What is this one doing?
Yeah, again, it's taking meeting lists and it's writing the information to SharePoint off those meeting lists, checking it for errors. And I don't know if you saw it, but I don't remember, to be quite honest. But it also sends off that, I think you saw the meeting or the email come up to say, I found an error. it's going to be in this folder. You need to go review it. So that's one of the slowdowns, obviously, is once it hits an error, it has to say, stop, what am I got to do for my error? Okay, we'll go move those files over. I'm going to send this email off.
I've had some people say to me, Henry, you're going to dock faster than that. You can't just go and tear through this process. And the answer is, in general, no. It's because it's going and using the user interface, especially when you're talking about a web browser, that page has to load.
Yeah.
You haven't programmatically connected to the database behind the web page. You're still going through that web page, you're clicking through it, and the bot has to wait until that page refreshes. So some things like entering data into a screen, you saw when it put stuff into SharePoint, types a lot faster than I did.
Right.
That was cranking through. So some things happen faster. Some things are just slowed down because that's the way the user interface is. In general, I think the bots are definitely performing similar tasks more quickly, but it's not. It's more like 30% faster rather than 300% faster.
Yeah.
David, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think this looks really slow because a lot's being done behind it that's not showing.
Yeah, you're not seeing it.
We run one of ours, and for instance, it goes out to 3 different vendor systems. You see it logging into the systems. You see it go and do queries on these quote IDs. The queries come up, it downloads it. You see everything going on. You see every line being pasted into Excel, and so it's going way faster. You're just not seeing a lot of the things this one's doing. It's just you're seeing the log file.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But
and that's a trade-off.
As an API.
That's right.
It's a end user thing. It's not an API.
That's right. Yep. Can only run as fast as the user interface can itself.
It can type a lot faster than I can.
Yeah, it types pretty darn quick.
I mean, how long does this take the guy?
It's about 7 minutes, I think, is what this runs at. And then this is just a little dashboard report. Yeah, this is just purely made up. Yeah, little dashboard report with some colors and charts and graphs and that sort of thing, and a pivot table showing you where the training occurred, in what cities, what kind of volume were the attendees of the course, that sort of thing.
So just a general question. I understand the demo you showed here, but have you come across a case where the front end is a mobile app or something, and then you do stuff on the back end? Have you seen a scenario where that could be useful?
I mean, we haven't come across that yet, no. I mean, if you can somehow emulate the mobile app on a web browser, I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, literally, unless it's...
The front end would remain mobile,
Mm-hmm.
but when the process hits the back end, then you could...
Oh, okay, yeah. I hear you, yeah. We haven't done that, but I'm sure it's... I say that so confidently. I'm sure it's... I mean, so long as a human can do it, I would say, then yeah. It's kind of the safe answer. Can a person do it? Yeah, then and can you explain to another person how to do it without a lot of, well, it depends on this and that and this, then yeah, sure. Yeah. Yep, so this is the last email. So file process complete, following message has been automated, all files have been successfully processed. Critical error file count 1, successful count I think is 1, done. Away it goes. So purely, like I said, not terribly exciting, but
I think it's exciting.
the demo or the overall concept of RPA?
Oh, it's kind of boring.
We prefaced it with this was not going to be as exciting as it looked.
I did try to set expectations as low as possible.
Yeah, I think we really need to set them low.
Made that demo a little more interesting.
Yeah.
Faster.
You know what I think we probably could do is we could just open the file that we're dealing with in the background and just have it open and then let it all happen in the background and then close it.
I mean, you can literally have words on top of that, make it a video. Now I'm going to get.
Yeah, probably could have little pop-ups. Now I'm doing this.
I don't know. I vaguely remember something like that.
Well, but we don't necessarily want a video because that doesn't prove that it's running automatically, right? So one of the
videos run pretty consistently.
That's hey.
I'll tell you what is exciting. This conversation for me is exciting. I really appreciate that everybody came and engaged, and there's this much interest and enthusiasm around it. This is what I hope for when setting up this meetup. And I really would love to encourage everybody here, if you have ideas for topics, I'm not out of ideas by a long shot, but I'd love to hear from everybody here. If you have a story to share or expertise to share with the group and are willing to do a meetup, I'd love to have you here to to do a meetup for everybody, and you know, I'll obviously post and promote and everything else. But no, this is I love this kind of stuff, and I love the engagement and the conversations and the questions and everything we've had tonight. It's been fantastic.
I agree.
We're probably at the end of.
Yeah, we're at 7:40, so.
Any last questions, thoughts anybody else has?
Yeah, one last question. So here, you know, the robot is taking over a machine.
Yes.
So what's the best practice? Do you have this running on that server and it's got like 10 robot users? Or
That's a very typical use case, yeah. So in our case, I think we have, it's either 12 or 16 right now running. And yeah, it's running on a server. They're running essentially as virtual desktops of their own,
Yep.
so that they can all act independently of one another.
Yep.
And they just, we can RDP in, take a look at them, see what's going on, but essentially they're just hands off.
Yep, yep.
You know, you wouldn't necessarily want to do anything in production on your desktop, of course. I mean, unless it's production for you.
Yeah.
You know, you and you only kind of thing, right? Where you can run it at 6 o'clock at night when you shut it down for the night, let it run, you go have dinner and that kind of thing, and away it goes. But I will tell you that if you'll notice I shut down everything that wasn't needed, because it does, to your point, it takes over the machine, and pop-ups and notifications and screensavers and yada, 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 all that kind of stuff have a tendency to kind of mess it around. But as long as the mouse is moving, it typically doesn't screen save, but little pop-ups will snag it sometimes. But they're not running on the server, right?
It's great stuff. Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you. Jim?
Very good. Thank you.
Next topic, next meeting.
Oh yeah, the next meetup, April 24th.